Well, hi, everybody. I am so grateful to have a friend, an inspirational guest today. You are going to hear Elena's healing journey today and how she used PEMF and other tools for Lyme disease and PANS. And there's just so much to absorb. You really want to hunker down, get yourself good cup of coffee, or if you're driving, lean in and listen because I know what it's like to be struggling. Both myself, I don't even talk about it. I'm somebody who's had Epstein-Barr since I was 17 years old, and it actually impacts how I do things in my life. But I'm certainly a PANS mom. So whether you're listening for your kid or you're listening for yourself, there's a lot of takeaways that are going to be happening because I know Elena's story. So welcome, Elena. I'm going to put you down as my Lyme warrior because you are one badass Lyme warrior. I know it doesn't always feel like that. But thank you for being here and thank you for being who you are. You are very much an advocate. You have helped so many people who've had Lyme disease. You and I met through Lyme Connection. We're also in the Lyme Connection movie about tick prevention, which was super fun. And Elena's husband, Rob, was my husband in the movie. So he always refers to me as his wife, Mr. Hodge. Thinks it's pretty funny. But please share with us, tell us a little bit about yourself. You've also become a health coach. And I think we should probably jump in with your story. And you are somebody who struggles. You identify as PANS now, but tell us a little bit about where you're at. And then let's restart and talk about how this awful stuff all happened.
First, I want to thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on your podcast. I'm a huge fan. And yeah, I have quite a story to tell. I have been sick most of my life and didn't realize it. My story began somewhere around 1986, 1987. It was the summer. I used to be an outdoors kid. Lyme was just recently discovered. I grew up not too far away from Lyme, Connecticut. I grew up in Waterford. And it's right along the shoreline, not far from, like I said, not far from Lyme. And I had a huge rash on my chest one of those summers. We were playing outside as kids. Nobody knew what it was. My mom's like, "Oh, you're probably bitten by a bug. Don't worry about it. It'll go away." There's lots of mosquitoes. We were always outside, so we didn't know what it was. But I remember it being purple and funny looking, and it hurt, and it hung around for a while. And then I wasn't ever the same after that. So I was about 10, 11 years old. And then I became more of a sickly child. I had allergies that developed. I suddenly had asthma that I didn't have before. I was getting infections all the time. And without fail, every Christmas for I don't know how many years, I had strep throat. And back then, there wasn't walk-in clinics. So you had to go to the ER and you had to wait because nobody was open on Christmas or Christmas Eve. And I was always there for antibiotics. So there's a pattern when you look backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Time when you're in it, you don't know what's going on. Your parents are doing the best they can, trying to keep you healthy.
It was the 80s. I mean, I'm Dr. Jones. He was in Connecticut. He was already aware of Lyme disease, but the rest of the world wasn't, I mean, it was really very, very new.
Mm-hmm. And we didn't have 40 million TV channels or the internet or places to share this information and look.
Did we even have Atari in 1986? I'm not sure. You know what I'm saying? I think we did. Well, you're right. I mean, even in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, is the internet came in the late, mid 90s. Knowledge on the internet, I would say, didn't even really get good until probably 2009, 2010. It was still very new, and you had to go to books, and then, for ideas to translate, it takes about 20 or 30 years to get into books.
Exactly.
The internet has changed that.
Mm-hmm. Tremendously. And that's funny that you bring up books because fast forwarding in my journey, that's where I found my first information about Lyme when someone first mentioned the possibility that it could be. I went to the public library and I started taking out books and information. And Dr. Liebner's book, one of his very first books, was the first one I read. And I started to cry because I identified with all these symptoms and all these things that were going on and all the strange things in my life. But I digress. Let me back up just a little bit to my childhood before I got to the point of diagnosis, because it's a heck of a story. So we think it was about 1986, 87. And then I went undiagnosed with just being kind of a sickly kid for 15 years. It wasn't until I was 22, I was out of college. I was working in television at the time. I was an assignment editor and an associate producer at Channel 3 in Hartford, and we went to a concert. It used to be called the Meadows, now it's the Xfinity Theater, but we couldn't afford the fancy seats. We're all just, broke kids working minimum age or minimum wage rather. And so we sat in the grass. And I believe in the middle of downtown Hartford, I was bitten by yet another tick on the top of my head. And at the time, I lived alone. So I didn't have anybody that could go through my hair and check to see what it was. But I remember scratching, digging something out of my head. And it was definitely a bug of some sort. 6 weeks later, almost to the day, I was overseas. My father's from South America, and he took me to visit my family, or actually to meet my family for the first time. That was my graduation gift. So I had worked for a few months, and then that September, we went down to Chile, and I was the only one that got sick. We were gone for 2 weeks. And the last 3 days of the vacation, I came down with the worst fever I'd ever had in my entire life, and everything that you could think of: ear infections, swollen throat, bronchitis, the gamut. I thought I was dying of the flu. In fact, I jokingly call it chili disease because nobody else got it. And I was the only one that had it. And I came back to the States sick as a dog. Being 22 and looking fine and young and healthy, I went to the doctor and she's like, "Oh, you have a double ear infection. You have bronchitis. You probably have strep. We'll send out a test and this and that." So they gave me antibiotics. They gave me steroids. They gave me antivirals. They gave me everything under the sun and sent me on my way. I was never the same. That was it. I was never the same from that point on. Then I started having cognitive problems and nervous system issues, and I was starting to see things, and I was starting to not like my job, and I was starting to have panic attacks out of nowhere, and I had the world in my hand at that point. There was no reason for any of this. Um, Things weren't making sense, and I was starting to get a little scared even. About the same time, I met my husband, and we had started dating. So there was some positive things going on in my life. So I wasn't paying so much attention to my symptoms at that point. I just thought I didn't like my job and I didn't like the hours because the hours were rough, especially when I worked on the morning show. I worked from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. So I didn't see the light of day, and that's not healthy for you. I've learned.
That's another contributor, right? And, and as you eloquently said, you're making sense looking back on this. When you're in the middle of it,
You
it
don't.
is very hard to make the connections.
For sure, for sure. And it was really, really scary. And I knew something was really wrong when I was driving to work. And in the back of my mind, there was a little voice saying, "You want to crash your car. You don't want to go in today.
Oh,
You don't want to be here." And it made no sense whatsoever. It was completely irrational. It's this little irrational voice. And I'm like, where is this coming from? And then I'm starting to have more and more of that kind of thing. And then the panic attacks set in, the hearts were going, and things just weren't making sense. So I was like, I got to get out of the darkness. That was the first step. So tried to look for a new job within the industry. At the time, it wasn't possible to move from where I was. I was kind of stuck writing the morning show unless I wanted to produce a different show. And that wasn't my ultimate goal at that time. I wanted to be a TV reporter. But like I said, I had also just met my husband and he kind of changed my mind. I fell in love instantly and couldn't leave. So I decided that I was going to change my career instead. So I did leave TV news, and with a lot of support with a new fiance and my family, I went back to school to become a teacher. And that's where my heart really was. I fell in love with being back in school and then teaching and being in front of the kids and working with them. And it was absolutely a wonderful experience. I was able to, because I already had a degree, I was able to fast forwards that and do it quickly and get my master's all at the same time. And then start my family and got married all in the middle of this. So I was doing lots of things that were really, really stressful with all these little symptoms starting to sneak out and be
good stressors, just so everybody know, can be as impactful as bad stressors, right? And your nervous system isn't going to know the difference.
No, I was dysregulated and didn't know it. And that's really kind of the underlying thing that now that I know what I know makes a lot of sense. But I kept going down further down the rabbit hole of dysregulation throughout time, trying to figure out what was wrong. So then I went to my primary care doctor just for a regular physical, and all of a sudden I just lost it in her office. Emotionally, I just started bawling that ugly cry. I had no control over my emotions. I couldn't explain what was going on. I just didn't feel right. I wasn't myself. She's like, "Oh," she came over and patted me on the back. "Dear, dear, I think you have a little touch of depression." I'm like, "Oh, really?" And I didn't feel depressed. I was getting married, I was having kids, I was doing what I wanted to do, I was changing my life, I was taking positive steps to be in the daylight and do things that made me happy. Why was I depressed? Why was I having this breakdown right here? It didn't make sense. So, of course, that's when we started down the misdiagnosis route, which lasted for 11 years. So they put me on a little bit of Prozac. Well, started with a little bit of Prozac because, of course, that's the answer to everything. It's a little
Oh,
bit of
it is the answer.
right? Magic bullet.
Yeah. Let's just slap a little pill on it instead of getting to the root causes.
And you don't wanna do that to a brand new marriage either, because there's so many side effects with that medication that kinda
Absolutely.
trouble there
Right?
too, you know? So yeah, and even in young healthy people, it does have side effects. So, that wasn't good, but I kept down that road because it seemed to make sense. So then I had babies, and after I had my second one, it was a very traumatic pregnancy. It was a very traumatic birth. It was very negatively stressful in this case. The child is beautiful. He's wonderful. I love him to death. He's a great guy now. But at that time, it was very, very scary. I had an emergency C section. They almost lost both of us. We were falling off the monitor. So they zoomed us in, and he was out within 7 minutes, and he was blue as a smurf. The little guy liked to dance inside of me, and he had wrapped his cord around his neck
Oh,
3 times. And so he had a very traumatic birth, which then resulted in some interesting other learning disabilities and things too. He's very, very dyslexic, which has turned into a superpower. And that's another story for another day. But it was really the birth of that child that really made things kind of crazy. But what did they blame it on? Postpartum depression. That's what it was, of course, after I had him, because the first day my husband went back to work after the 6 weeks was up, or 8 weeks after having a C-section, he was going to go back to work and leave me home alone with the two kids. And I had the worst panic attack ever. I think he spent more time on the phone with me than at work. And that's when my butt got sent back to the psychiatrist, and they're like, "Yep, postpartum here." And they handed me some other pills. So not
and they
only
don't even make a connection to that you've had this horrible birth where you almost lost your child, you almost lost your own life,
yep.
and how activating that is for your nervous system and even just in your mindset, like how scary that was.
It was absolutely terrifying. And I didn't want a C-section. That was actually one of my biggest fears. But whoever the anesthesiologist was, he's my best friend because he got me through it. And everything in the end worked out okay. But that really, I think, was the biggest trigger that then started this landslide. And then the misdiagnosis, I started going to the psychiatrist every week, and I don't know how many meds I went through. I tried everything on the market for mental health at that point, and they even had me on lithium, like not lithium orotate, the supplement,
Yeah, real lithium.
or lithium, the stuff that takes your affect away. Yep.
Yeah.
That was
And no changes, Elena, like you just moved through this.
mhm.
Yeah.
It was one to the next, the next. Meanwhile, I'm still having symptoms. I'm physically getting worse. I'm getting weaker. My ability to focus, my ability to teach. I was then diagnosed with narcolepsy because I was falling asleep. I fell asleep driving. And when the person hit their horn so I wouldn't, hit them, it wasn't even enough to get that adrenaline going that scares you to death. So you're wide awake and then you drive like you're supposed to then. No, I started to fall back asleep again. I could not control anything. I was losing control of all my bodily functions and emotions, just
And
everything.
you got babies too.
Had babies, and I was working full time as a teacher, and I'm married to a fireman, and so we have crazy schedules and family trying to help out with the babies, and it was just a nightmare. It was really, really bad. So I took some time off from work, tried to figure out what was going on. I did a sleep study. Yep, narcolepsy. So then they put me on this crazy stimulant that I needed more than the FDA allowed, and we had to go through. I even had to ask Dr. Senator Blumenthal for help to get the medication that I needed to keep me awake so I could keep doing my job. So I'd be all hyped up on all these stimulants, and then I couldn't get to sleep at night. So my my nighttime sleep wasn't good. So things were just throwing everything out of whack and creating more stressors. And so
And you're just trying to survive, Elena.
I'm
Like, you're like this. I think, being a PANS mom, you're in it and you're like, this thing's going to help. Then you go to the next thing and you're like, this thing's going to help. And then you're like, no, this is really going to help. Right. And I don't even want to say you were duct taped, because I don't even know how you were making it. Sometimes you're duct taped and you're like, okay, we got all these things and it's sort of working. I'm not great, but it's sort of working. You weren't even barely functional.
barely functional. I started going to the chiropractor because I was having a lot of pain and I was going for adjustments, and he was a neurological chiropractor, and he was like, this sounds an awful lot like Lyme disease. So I told my psychiatrist that I was seeing that my chiropractor thought maybe it was Lyme disease. So he sent me for Lyme tests. I failed the ELISA 7 times, 11 times, something like crazy like that before. I said, well, isn't there another test? He goes, well, we could move on to a Western blot. Of course, I failed that too, not knowing how sick I was. But it makes perfect sense because all the stuff is so immunosuppressive that I had no antibodies going on and no immune system left. So I was never going to pass a test unless it was a specialized test at that point anyhow. So the chiropractor picked up on it.
Let's stop on that for a second, because that may be a new concept for people listening, because there is a false belief that, in Lyme and PANS, right? In PANS, you got to take the Cunningham panel, you're taking a Western blot, you're doing a panel. Even when you do the advanced panels, these are very evasive bacterias, toxins, different things. They don't always show up on testing, and nor is it required for a clinical diagnosis of Lyme disease or any of the tick-borne illnesses or PANS and PANDAS. So I want to make that clear, because people get so hung up on that.
They do. They do. They absolutely do. And you don't know, the Cunningham used to be the gold standard. It's not.
Not.
It is a good practitioner with a lot of experience that can piece all these little things together and see the patterns and knows how to take regular. You could diagnose someone with Quest tests if you know what you're doing.
That's right. And they're used for treatment, not diagnosis. I hope that's an aha moment for people. So not even just the tests that look at the tick-borne infections, but what's happening to nutrients in the body, what's happening in your endocrine system, because you should be taking a 360 aerial view, and these tests are very helpful. But just because you don't turn up positive on these tests does not mean you're not affected. You have to look at things clinically, and you have to be working with an expert in Lyme or PANS or PANDAS, because otherwise you just go from rabbit hole to rabbit hole and you waste time. And people say, well, this provider is in network. Well, if you're going to 10 providers in network and you're paying all those copays, plus the longer it's there, the harder it is to deal with on spiritual, emotional, physical levels. Just go to an expert wherever it is. I know there's more of them, way more of them than there was 20 years ago or even 5 years ago. I've seen a real positive increase. Still hard to find, but it's important.
But it's hugely important. Yeah. So one of the things I was doing to try and help myself, because the biggest thing that nobody would take seriously, and it was glaringly obvious, is I developed severe Bell's palsy. And it was an instant onset. I was driving to work, and when I pulled into my parking spot, I looked in the rearview mirror and my face had fallen, and it felt heavy and it felt weird. So I was initially taken to the hospital thinking they checked me for a stroke.
Sure.
We had been camping with the kids about 6 weeks before the Bell's palsy had the onset. So it's possible I had another exposure. I had been bitten again and didn't know it, or it was just stress. Because stress over time, exacerbates all of these symptoms and brings it out and makes it worse. And as you're trying to figure it out, it's really quite a nightmare. So they gave me the usual doxycycline, which I'm allergic to, so that didn't help. We had another problem after that. And so from that point, we decided, you know what, it's not a psych problem. There's something else going on, because this is physical. I started dragging my right foot. I started having trouble tingling down my right arm. So then, of course, they thought it was MS. So we went for that. So that was one of my other misdiagnoses. Someone thought I had that. So we went to 11 neurologists in 1 year. None of them could agree on anything. They were absolutely not helpful, and Lyme never came up with any of it. They were more concerned with MS possibly, and the narcolepsy
Mhm.
was more of a pressing issue, even though I had that kind of under control with the stimulants. That was kind of my duct tape for
And let's reframe these for a second because, the majority of people come to me, I always say they have shopping cart diagnoses.
Mhm.
What they were chasing was symptoms,
Yes.
right? And so you have this, well, that kind of sounds like it's MS. Oh, you're falling asleep. Well, that's narcolepsy. And it doesn't mean you didn't meet that clinical criteria, but when you start having a lot of diagnoses, you have not gotten to the root cause. I promise you that. And I think people know that, but they're still just struggling to figure out what that root cause is. That's why I think your story is so powerful because and just so everybody knows, I'm going to mention this if this is okay. There's actually a whole movie about Elena called The Monster Inside of Me. Go ahead, show it cuz and
I'm the
there's
part of
yeah.
it.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it. And it's really detailed and it's a hard story to watch. And it's
Yes.
like I'm grateful that you share your story because we have these conversations to prevent people from going down the rabbit hole, which is so easy to do when we trust the traditional models of both mental health and physical, health care.
Right.
These are broken systems.
They are.
And but so you're there, they're saying it's narcolepsy, they're saying it's MS. What happened next?
So I started, my chiropractor had suggested I try acupuncture to see if we get things moving in the face to try and open that up because we knew it wasn't a stroke. We knew it was something neurological. There was some inflammation going on in there with the nerves that was causing my face to not function properly and it slurred my speech. It was just making things really difficult. So I was going to acupuncture with a wonderful naturopath whom I'm still very good friends with today. She's amazing. And she kept saying over and over again, it's got to be Lyme. It's got to be Lyme. And she happened to know of the specialist that I ended up working with. So she was wonderful. She helped me get all the testing done that I needed to get done in order to see this guy, but I was on his waiting list for quite some time. It was hard to find a Lyme specialist back then. It's still hard now. Everybody is on a waiting list, but that's just how it works. And I got my break. I was able to get in. I was able to finally see somebody in August of 2013. So that's when I officially started with Lyme plus multiple co-infections. We finally this naturopath knew to test for more than Lyme, which is huge. Lyme's like the star of the concert, but
Mhm.
all the players in the background that make up the whole picture. You can't have the band without everybody else. So there was Bartonella in there was some Babesia in there was heavy metals, there's mycotoxins, there you name it. I was loaded
They
up.
all wanted to come to the concert, Elena.
I wanted to be part of it. There was a huge party going on inside of me of parasites and all sorts of yucky things, and I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
But we finally got to the answer, and once I showed up with my book, I was smart. I went and got all my records from every hospital. I had so many ER trips, it wasn't even funny. So I called the hospital, I paid the money to have them printed out, and literally have a binder that's a 5-inch binder full of all my records. And I'm glad I had that because I brought it with me to my first actual Lyme doctor appointment, and it made all the difference. I got treatment immediately. We had things scheduled. It was a 9-hour appointment, my very first one. And
Wow.
9 hours of time. Like he saw the patients in between, but he couldn't let me leave until he had me squared away. So I started with a PIC line within a month and was doing IV antibiotics. And a lot of that's because I had a lot of allergies. We already knew I was allergic to doxycycline, which is the gold standard for, for tick-borne stuff. So we had to get a little creative and we had to work with the insurance and fight with them and end up costing me out of pocket a lot of money because I had to, until we finally got them to cover things, we had to pay for it ourselves. But it was that or die. Like I was at that
Right.
point, I was that sick. And my
And
doctors,
you were no longer working at this point, like,
oh, I still was. I was still teaching.
holy cow, Elena.
I had just transferred districts. I had left the district that I had been with for years, and I went up to because I wanted to grow as a professional. I was excited. I needed change. So I thought, all right, this is great change. I signed the contract, and then I got the appointment to see the Lyme specialist 7 days later. When it rains, it pours. So I was like, all right, well, maybe this is a good sign. I'm going to start a whole new life. I'm teaching in a new place. I'm going to get treatment. Things are going to be great. My life's going to take off. I'm finally going to be doing exactly what I want to do. and it didn't exactly go that well. I didn't realize how sick I was and how hard treatment was going to be. I was able to get off the psych meds, which helped tremendously in that respect. But the antibiotic treatment and the herbals and everything else really did a number on my system. And my appetite had not been good to begin with. And this made it even worse. So I started losing a lot of weight. I was losing my muscle mass. I was losing my ability to stand up and just hold myself up and to do what I needed to do. And then I was starting to have almost dyslexic like symptoms. And being an English teacher, language arts teacher, that's not cool. You can only trick the kids with, oh, I was just checking to make sure that you knew that I was spelling that correctly so many times before they catch on to you, especially when they're in sixth grade. So I kind of had to stop at that point. I did reach out for help, and then they kind of asked me to not come back because I think they were afraid that I was so frail that I was going to either perish in front of the kids or they were going to end up losing their teacher. And for their sake, it was better that I had not finished that year out either. And I ended up just letting it go because the treatment became even more aggressive.
Yeah, nobody warned you that, the treatment can really kick things up. And it's not just antibiotic treatment, it can be
Right.
IVIG or other forms of treatment,
And
and they don't always educate you, practitioners. No,
This can be even worse than the actual antibiotics.
many times it can be.
That were like, whoa, absolutely amazingly strong stuff, but effective. But the whole thing of it is it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. The
What is it?
whole process from getting diagnosed and going through treatment and then the healing. I'm still healing. I'm not 100% healed yet. I've been in remission for a while. I've had several other stressful things come up and issues, but now I'm more just an adult living with PANS, and I'm trying to
Yeah.
get as healed as possible, and to keep myself emotionally regulated and my nervous system in check. And that's really where your products and help have come in so much. I have to throw a plug in for your magnesium right now because my entire family cannot sleep without it.
Hold on, let me grab it, Elena.
There it is. That
You can't see it if you're listening, but I do. I mean, you were there. You were tasting it, like it was made with a lot of not just love, but care and high quality. Like it is designed for the nervous system and the brain. That is what it is. Like there isn't a product like it in the market because this is why we created it. And I needed something that kids could take and adults. But I know your whole family takes it. I see, but it's helpful, right? It's helped you sleep. It's helped you to regulate. I think one of the things, I've been there and I know you and I had the conversation about, wait, I'm not just Lyme on PANS. Help people to understand that because, PANS is about multiple infections, causing a misdirected immune response. And at a certain point, I wish Lyme and PANS people would all get together and then we would have more power in numbers. But you really recognized you were an adult living with PANS. And I think it's amazing that you're telling people that because then they start rethinking some of the things that we're doing, right? Because Lyme is deeply about infection, but PANS is about not just neuroinflammation, but systemic inflammation.
Yes.
And they have a much better understanding. I think both are starting to understand that I talk about this all the time. There are two major obstacles I see with people not getting better. Number one, it's nervous system dysregulation. Every product, everything I do is all about nervous system dysregulation and helping to regulate it. But the second thing is improper detoxification. So when you first did your heavy duty stuff, they were blasting you, but they probably didn't know enough about detox at that point. And that was why you got so sick. I mean, you were going to get so sick because you were already sick for, 2 decades of your life. Right?
Yeah. It's if you're going to be sick for that long, it's going to take that much longer to get it out of you too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did the genetic testing as well. And I've got the MTHFR double hit of it. So I had to change my detox protocol and regimen and all of that. And I've done saunas, I've sweated it out, I've taken the pills, I've done the herbals, I've done all the tinctures, oh my goodness.
Yeah. And you live a very careful life, right? You have to protect yourself. And, for you, this has been beyond a hard journey. I mean, you're making sense of things and you always have a lightheartedness. I mean, I think there's many things I love about Elena, and she's a great human being in general, but she has an amazing attitude 95% of the time, right? About all of this. And your attitude and your mindset has been so impactful in your physical and mental health. Talk a little bit about that, because that is, I think, the hardest thing. But it's so impactful. Like, I can have, I work with adults too. I have an elderly woman I'm working with Lyme disease. But many of the parents I come with, I can have so many degrees of the same issue. And I could have the kid with the worst level of it. But if those parents have faith, positive attitude, their outcomes are vastly better than the kid who has a quarter of the same issue. And I really want parents to hear that, because I want people to know, that it's of course upsetting. Of course it's hard, but you have control of your mind, and you have the ability to control it 24 hours a day.
Yes.
Even when everything else is out of control. And you do that so well. It's truly inspiring. How do you do it most of the time? Like, how do you do that? Give people some insight so that they can feel inspired to take those actions for themselves.
Sure, absolutely. Well, the first thing was I decided that I was going to win this no matter what. That was the very beginning. No, there was nothing that was going to stop me. We were going to keep going until we figured out what it was, and then we're going to figure out how to get it as under control as possible. So that was the first step. In fact, when I left my very first actual Lyme specific appointment, I looked at my husband. I said, "You know what? I'm going to make this disease work for me." And that was kind of it. I was never going to let it win, and I was going to find a way to incorporate it and use it for good. Because
You really become an advocate, helping other people understand it.
Yeah, we went up to the state. I've sat before, I testified before the state of Connecticut to help recognize May as Lyme Disease Awareness Month in Connecticut officially. In the place where it was actually first spotted, it wasn't officially ever recognized until it took 3 years and a couple days up in the Capitol, but we finally got it to pass. So I've done that. I've done the movie work. I've volunteered. I've done some cool things with you with Lyme Connection. We've done a lot of different things. So getting involved was part of it, but always having something to do was another piece of it. Because if your mind has nothing else to focus on, it's going to take you to some really dark and creepy places. And Dr. Google becomes like your enemy, and it's bad. You can't go there. So that's a huge piece that keeps me kind of not going down.
And as lonely as a journey as this is, because I talk about it. I'm like, I'm writing my next book about dysregulation, and you're actually hearing this first. So my first chapter, I think, is the bitches on the bus stop. I always love to talk about them. But it's all about being lonely and the journey and the rejection and the power that you need to find within yourself, right?
Exactly.
And this is a place where most people have abandoned you. When you have a sick kid, you're sick all the time. If you had cancer, everybody would be around.
Yep.
But as soon as it crosses over into a murkiness and or mental health,
yes.
I don't know if people think it's contagious. I don't know what it is, but they just back the hell out.
They do. They do.
And I think that's one of the hardest places. And, that's where I have limited my friendships and relationships and leaned into the people that are my people. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's really also important too, because there is a duality in that, yes, you get clarity of who the people are, but there's a sadness too.
There is,
but that's where your mindset and having clarity and keeping yourself busy is important too, because if you're alone, you're in there. Let's talk about, you've done a lot of things. You've done a lot of treatments. as many people are who have Lyme and PANS and they're not getting better. What do you want to say to people? Because again, you can watch The Monster Inside of Me. It's very powerful. And I would definitely encourage people to watch that. What do you feel like you'd want people to know so that they're in the marathon, but they can make it where they're not getting as many blisters?
Right, right. There is a light at the end of that tunnel. It's sometimes a glimmer, but there is a light at the end, and you have to keep just focusing on that and keep trying new things. But you can't just try it for a week, and you can't just try it for a day or even a month. Sometimes you need 3 months. On average, it takes 12 weeks to create a new habit or develop a new habit. It takes 12 weeks to see if something works too. A lot of people quit things too soon or don't trust their doctor. And it's hard after you've been dismissed so many times and gaslit so many times. You don't necessarily want to trust them because you start to shy away after you've been rejected so many times. But at the same time, you have to trust, and you have to hope that they have your best interest in mind and follow what they say. Because if you do what you refer to as sprinkle therapy, you're not going to go anywhere.
No,
I've tried it. I've been there. It does not
no.
work. You have to do the whole package.
I see that as one of the, besides mindset and not, the focusing on the dysregulation and the actual detox, sprinkle therapy and chasing a medical solution only.
Yep.
I just can't believe. I mean, I had somebody the other day and I was talking to them and they were like, I used to teach nervous system dysregulation, literally is what they said. And I'm hearing you because I say calm the brain, everything else follows. That's what it is. Your psychoanalogy tells us you're not going to get better. That's why people get better when they come to me, and you know this.
Yep.
And we'll talk about some of the things that you did. But they keep chasing the antibiotic, this, that. And I'm not saying they're not important. What I'm saying is they can't work physiologically in the same way if you're not regulating the nervous system. It's not going to allow it to work in the same way. And people will just do this like on Groundhog Day. On Groundhog Day, same thing with psych meds.
Right.
Like, I'm like, what are you doing? And I think there's a deep distrust of people's inner gut. Like, I see so many wounded mothers. I've been there, right? You've been there. I mean, we didn't even talk, your mama dyslexics, like we get it. But you have to have a constancy in what you do things. And if you're jumping around, you're not gonna find the answer to that. I mean, if I had a dime for every person with PANS or PANDAS who's like, I don't want to do the OCD therapy. It's like OCD is there now. You cannot fix it with just herbals or antibiotics. It's now a behavioral habit of the brain. I show them the slides, I go over the thing, and they're like, sorry, I'm not going to do it.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, I can't really help you. This is why we have a selective process. Like, I believe that I can help anybody as long as they're, willing to do their part too. And I think people are so burnt because they're like, well, I did this and I did this and I did that. And you've been there too, right?
Yeah, you have to take a break for a little bit and just kind of just stop and reset and say, okay, what's most important? What's most aggravating? What's going on? Where do I need to go next? And
I think, we've reconnected at different points. And I think the last time you were like, I'm feeling very anxious. And that seems to be the biggest thing for me. And that's when, let's talk about some of the things that you did then, right? Like,
that's you. Yep.
Yeah, right. You reached out to me.
I did. Yeah. I figured it out. I listened to your podcast enough to know, even though you work mostly with children, I knew you worked with adults, and I was identifying with all the things you were talking about, especially with PANS. I'm a picky ass eater. I like the way things feel in my mouth. I don't like the way certain clothes feel on my body. Things need to be soft. I need pockets so I can put my PEMF so I can carry it with me everywhere. Like, I have certain little almost OCD-like requirements, but they're healthier ones now because they're for a reason. But yes, I reached out to you because I knew that my brain was not regulated and my body was not regulated and nothing else was working. And I was hitting the wall over and over and over again. And my frustration level was so up there because I was feeling physically much better, but the head wasn't connecting, and the body and the gut are connected to each, like everything's
And you
connected.
were at a plateau place because you were working with phenomenal providers on the medical side, like top
Yep.
people doing a lot of things. And you were like, I just can't. And you self-identified that you were feeling this anxiety, this tension in your body, and a lot of mental spinning.
Exactly, a lot of it, and I was waking up at 3 AM every single morning. I was getting tired of seeing that number and not getting my deep sleep, because I know that's when you heal and your brain drains and you detox when you're in that nice deep sleep overnight, and I wasn't getting that. I wasn't moving forward. I was stuck. I was flat out stuck. So I reached out. I wanted to know if there was any way I could get in to try the neurofeedback to see what it would do to my system, and brain map. I didn't know that you did brain maps. I wish I found you at least 10 years sooner. Like, I kick myself in the butt, because I think my healing, I would be so much further ahead had I
And yet
seen.
we knew each other for 10 years. It's so funny. People are like, what is this thing, you know? And your brain map, I mean, it showed you were in a sympathetic dominant state. Your brain was on fire. And essentially, she's so good at functioning, well, you want to call it masking, or, like that you were essentially a walking panic attack.
Mhm.
And you just lived in that state. You didn't recognize it at that, but that's the level of stress that was actually happening physically
Yes.
and in your brain. And we were like, we got to calm this stuff down. And so you leaned back into some of the things that you had done in the past, had nothing to do with me, like, okay, what are things that helped, right? Because that's, I think people forget.
Mhm.
Like, wait, that actually did help. That's a lot of what I do when people work with me.
Right.
Like we go through the closet and
Yeah.
we make new outfits. We
Yes.
like, we need to get a whole new thing. Wait, let's see what you got. Like, and people are often really surprised by that. Right. But
No.
yeah, because they say if I'm not 100% that it didn't work. No. You might not have done it at the right time, the right order, or long enough. Right.
Mhm.
And so from there, you started using the calm PEMF. She's got hers right there. And you use it all the time. And we did some neurofeedback and talk about, so just for people who are listening, you should know what PEMF is, but if you're new to me, it's a technology that sends a signal to the cell and changes the way the cells are functioning, turns disharmonious, unhealthy communication into a healthy one, pulls you into a parasympathetic state right away, and also improves detoxification and inflammation. And we have 3 that are designed specifically for infections and toxins. You use anxiety and stress, don't you?
Anxiety and stress.
Yeah, because we tried them.
Yep.
And because that really was your problem. Like
It wasn't the infections anymore.
the infections were under control. It was like the devastation that was left.
Yeah.
And then we did neurofeedback, which is brainwave retraining in specific regions. Our number one goal with you was just to calm your brain down.
You didn't have me only doing one down training spot.
Yeah, right. She couldn't even handle. We had to just try to train her brain to push down anxiety. That's all we could do. And talk about your experiences. I mean, first of all, PEMF is easy. Like, it's a Big Mac. You just carry it with you.
It is. I call it my Xanax in my pocket. It's the best. I even
really is. Yeah.
pocketbook so that has a little pocket so I can have it up against my body when I'm out and about and doing it, because the fanny pack, although stylish, it's not my style.
No.
It works, and it's great, especially for kids who sleep with their shirts off. You need to strap it on them. I highly recommend.
And just to understand, you have to have it close to your body. Ideally, you're putting in your chest or your belly. I do it a lot of times on my shoulder. You can't get it wet. You can't get it moist or wet, but it can handle just about anything. And I wear it all the time. At night, I have, we call it a Philomena vest. My mother always wore a vest. Those fleece vests that have the pockets. So I wear that to bed, and then I just stick it in my pocket because we have a 1 hour, 2 hour, and an 8 hour cycle. But, and depending, it's not every protocol is Xanax in your pocket.
No.
Certain protocols, like we have a calm brain, we have a calm body, right? On the anxiety one, we even have a focus one on there too.
That's what I'm doing right now, is learning to focus, because it helps.
Well, it zaps you right up, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And that's, when I was working, I would run at that setting. That's the one that
Yeah.
keeps me social. And when I go out, that's the one that's running when it's in my purse. And yeah, it keeps
See,
me.
where I'm always needing to calm my butt down, like I'm all spazzy all the time. So, not that I don't, sometimes, listen, I'm a woman of a certain age and sometimes you don't sleep. So sometimes you need a little focus, but that was like an easy fix for you. And, 95% of people do feel something immediately, but
Mhm.
5% don't,
Yeah.
including, as I always say, Mr. Hodge never feels anything, but then the symptoms he's trying to address, and we have something different at home, different versions. Like he uses it a lot because he's always working out. So he's
Mhm.
always getting injured, but he will be like, wow, I used it. And the next day my muscles improved to this, that, whatever we're trying to address, a cold,
Right.
right? Respiratory infection, whatever they're, but most people experience it and feel it. It's kind of insane how quick it can work. So
It is.
the
It is.
things I do, most of them have a quick effect.
Mhm.
They don't have the long it's a long-term gain, right? Like, you can't just be like, "Wow, I did it the one time, I'm better."
Mhm.
It's over time, and that's what neurofeedback is in particular for you. Like, at
Mhm.
first, you were like, I don't know," and then, you start pushing down your symptoms and improving things, right?
Felt weird at first to feel calm because I had been so ramped up for so long that it was a strange feeling, and I always didn't know if that was right or correct. And
Yeah,
but then you like it, and then you wanna do it more, and it motivates
yeah,
you to keep doing the neuro because it feels so good. And then being a busy mom, it's also a half hour alone by yourself, and you get to
yeah.
watch something cool on your screen. So there's so
I
much.
know, and everyone always thinks like, "Oh, it's gonna be hard to get my kids to do it." No, no. And plenty of people have. It's just not. One person ever refused it.
Yep.
Darn it, you ruined my record. And please know it doesn't harm the brain. That's probably the number one question we get.
Mhm.
It is working, nothing's coming through. EEG neurofeedback, right? There are other forms of infraslow. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. It's not appropriate for Lyme and PANS, and the research doesn't show that it produces lasting change in the brain, right? And when we're talking about, these are nervous regulation tools, right? So the magnesium, even the techniques, the types of
Mhm.
therapies we use, psychotherapies, they're
Mhm.
all about nervous system regulation.
They are.
If you are not regulating, and there are many ways, diet is a part of that, right?
Oh,
Mindset, all these things. I mean, that's part of what we do in our brain behavior reset
right.
program. It is so much more than neurofeedback. It
Mhm.
is a guidance through
It
your
is.
unique journey. And it's not just, yes, we have a ton of PANS, yes, we have a ton of Lyme, but that's not the only case. And,
Right.
I think when I hear your story, right, your nexus was Lyme,
Mhm.
right? It was tick-borne infection, right? You had classic symptoms, by the way. It's kind of crazy that somebody didn't do it a decade before.
Yeah.
But there could be other nexuses,
Mhm.
right? And there are other reasons why neuroinflammation is a standard. I almost never see a brain map of anybody under age 25, I
Mhm.
would say 30, that doesn't have significant neuroinflammation. I will see less in older brains,
Mhm.
which is the opposite of what you would expect.
It is.
Yes, and it's because they had better food quality, they weren't exposed to the same level of plastics, they didn't grow up. I mean, today, I mean, people are I still every day, every week, get people whose symptoms either worsened during the pandemic
Mhm.
or they all of a sudden got psychiatric problems during the pandemic. They just didn't recover from the emotional side of it,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
I just got a case this week that had COVID-induced PANS, and they're startled by how horrible care is,
Yes.
because they were like, "We figured it out," and I was like, "I know," like, I mean, and I'm glad. And there are people that very, very in tune with themselves, and they didn't need somebody to tell them what they were like, "We're gonna find somebody who's gonna help," which is why they're me,
Right.
but they are very secure in themselves, and so their child will get better. because they're secure in themselves. And don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing you. I've been there in the insecurity place with you before. You know, where you're every night, 3 a.m., bing, every worry comes out, you know, but it's people are so gaslighted.
They are. That you don't trust yourself any longer, and you don't trust your instincts, but your instincts are there. They're there for a reason. You have to listen to your body, and you have to listen to what it's telling you, because it will tell you the truth.
Well, in your case, you realized, I mean, I can't believe you were going to work and had the kids and doing all these things, married to a firefighter, and you were somehow just pushing through it. And it really was, what happened is you lost so much weight that you were fragile at that point, physically fragile. But you know, there are so many signs, there were so many things along in your journey, and yet you had points where you probably got smidge better, and you said, no, like, there's gotta be something else. Thank God you kept going and trying to find out, because honestly, Elena, you'd be dead today.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've had multiple near-death experiences throughout all of this.
I know, you have. And, you know, I think the most inspiring part of this is just you're just so inspirational in your will, and that you were not gonna accept this, and you said, "I'm going to get better." So, whether you're saying that for yourself or you're saying that for your child, which it's hard when it's yourself.
Right.
Even harder when it's your kid. It feels very out of control. You know, many parents will say to me, "I wish it was me." And I'm like, "Okay, this is what it is." You know, and I think you had so many things that are important, right? Even to look back, you know, you've had decades of this, right? Look back. What worked? What didn't? Right? Are you really are you or your child, are they really better? Because if you're not, you probably haven't gotten to the root cause. Would you agree?
I would totally agree that there's probably something else underlying. If you're not back to close to your baseline, you should be at least 85% yourself.
Yes.
There's a,
Yeah.
you know, there's that 25% in there, that 15, 25% that, yeah, that you're going to fluctuate. You're not the same person that you were when you started the journey, when you get to the end. I think people also confuse that too. They expect to be exactly the same as they were before they got sick, and you'll never be exactly the same again. I like to think you're going to actually be better. I think people that go through this end up, once they develop the habits of good living and get into that mindset and that routine of eating well, sleeping well, moving daily, whether it's 5 minutes of on the rebounder or just walking, movement counts. You have to move. You have to move the fluid so you can detox. It's not a choice, even if you don't feel like it. And oftentimes those pains will go away if you add a little movement.
Totally.
And then you're a good tired because you've done something, so you can be proud of that, and that becomes one of your little wins. A lot of getting better is finding those little wins, those little tiny things to celebrate, no matter how silly they are, or having something to look forward to. You always kind of want to sort of preset your schedule so that there's something good that you know is coming, whether it's your favorite pajamas are coming out of the dryer that day and you're psyched to wear them to bed that night, or it's meeting a friend for coffee, or it's you're having your favorite dinner. It could just be something super simple, or the book you've been waiting for on audio because you can't read finally came into the library and you get to start listening tonight. Those little things are little wins, and people overlook the little tiny things that help move you forward. And it's basic, it's simple, it's free, it's right in front of you.
And the little wins are so important, Elena, because so many of the people I work with, so many of the families are like, if they're not in school, it's a failure. If they're not back on the swim team, it's a failure. And so you're never going to be able to see the wins if you're only looking at the summit, right? We always talk in our program, we talk about getting to base camps instead of the summit, right? You can get to the summit, but you'll never appreciate and be able to look back, and if you can't focus on that. And that's really, this is a brain hack. This is a way, because your brain needs to see success in order to achieve success. So if you always focus on the negatives, you will never get better. It doesn't matter if your child has ADHD dysregulation, or it's PANDAS, or it's OCD. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're constantly focusing on that big goal, your brain is only going to really see those negatives. You've got to really appreciate, recognize, and lean into the small wins.
Yep.
I think that is so, so powerful. And for you, I also want to say, you mentioned lifestyle. People look at dietary changes and, having to go to bed at time. They look at it as an albatross, right?
Right.
It is honestly, these things are a blessing,
They are.
right?
They
And
are.
you are like, you're not going to just be like, wow, I got better. I'm going to, like go have some US glyphosate filled wheat again.
Right.
You're going to take these lessons and you're going to continue to apply them for lifelong health, brain and physical health.
Mhm.
And that's important. And also you now realize how important regulating your nervous system and your mental health is, because without that, that's a linchpin
It is.
for getting physically better, correct?
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been such an awesome conversation, and I encourage everybody to, if you haven't seen the monster inside me, please do. If you want to learn more about our calm PEMF, we got ours, Elena. You go to drroseann.com/calm PEMF, all one word. I made this because we've been using these now it's been 10 years, but we were using these on hundreds of patients for about 8 years. And these are the protocols that I tested on all those people. And we made these devices, and it's portable, it's easy to use. And again, there's 6 protocols, and there's 1 hour, 2 hour, and 8 hour cycles, all designed to regulate the nervous system, support detoxification, help you with stress and sleep, no matter which one you get. And you can always call our office and we'll help walk you through whatever it is that you need, but you can go to that website. But I'm so grateful that you are sharing this story, and whether you encourage people to watch that. What do you feel like you'd want people to, you're listening and on the show, please leave a review and talk about how this was inspirational, or you're watching us on YouTube. Please, share some of the takeaways. Don't troll me. Write nice things. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say it. But anyway, I love you, my friend. And I'm so glad you're on the upswing and you're doing well and you were able to share your time with us, because it is really impactful.
I thank you. And I hope this reaches tons of people and helps them a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you.